I usually scroll right past celebrity news. It just feels like the same three headlines on a loop. But then you handed me this file, Shadows of Justice, the Jolie Pitt FBI inquiry. And I realized pretty quickly this isn't really a celebrity story at all.
Right.
I mean, the names are famous, sure,
Right.
but the substance. This is a story about federal jurisdiction, the weird legal gray zones of air travel, and what happens when someone tries to get answers from the Department of Justice.
It's a procedural thriller masquerading as a tabloid headline. That's what caught my eye, too. We aren't here to talk about a divorce. We're here to look at a very specific collision between a private family crisis and, well, the federal government.
And it all centers on a question that I think most of us would find, frankly, terrifying. What if something happened to you, something traumatic, and the official government record basically said, nope, it didn't?
Or at least not enough to matter.
Exactly. Because that's the core of the document we're diving into today. It's all about Angelina Jolie demanding transparency for an FBI investigation into an alleged assault by Brad Pitt on a private plane back in 2016.
Right. And to understand why this matters now, years later, you have to look at the mechanism of how these cases are closed. The source material highlights this massive disconnect between what happened and what can be prosecuted. Jolie isn't just asking for gossip. She's using the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, to try and pry open a black box.
Okay, so let's start with the incident itself, or I guess the setting of the incident. September 2016, a private flight from France to Los Angeles. Things allegedly get heated, get physical. Now, if this happens in a living room in Beverly Hills, the LAPD shows up. Simple. But because it's up in the air, the entire rule book just changes.
It changes everything. This is one of those surprising facts you don't really think about. When you're in the air, you aren't in California. You're not in France. You are, effectively, in a floating territory. It's under the special aircraft jurisdiction of the United States.
This sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It feels like it. It means local laws are just suspended. You're dealing with federal statutes.
Yeah.
So when the plane lands, you don't get a beat cop. You get the FBI and the Department of Children and Family Services.
Wow.
But here's the kicker that the source really unpacks. Federal prosecution thresholds are significantly different than state ones.
How so? Is it just harder to get arrested by the feds for something like this?
Much harder. For this type of offense, yes. The FBI, you have to remember, isn't designed to referee domestic disputes. They're built for counterterrorism, a bank robbery, interstate racketeering. When they look at an altercation on a plane, they aren't just asking, did he hit her or was he abusive? They're looking for specific violations of federal safety codes.
Like interference with a flight crew.
Interference with a flight crew or felony assault that meets a very, very specific statutory definition.
So you could theoretically have a situation where behavior that would get you arrested in a parking lot doesn't even trigger a federal indictment.
Precisely. Because it doesn't cross that high bar of interfering with the aircraft. And that's where the friction starts. The investigation happens. The FBI interviews everyone, the parties, the kids, any witnesses. And then they issue what's called a declination. They decline to prosecute.
And for Brad Pitt's team, and I guess for the legal system, that's the period at the end of the sentence. Case closed.
Legally, yes. But the source material points out that for Jolie, that period felt more like an erasure. And this is where we get to the real news hook, the lawsuit. Years later, Jolie files a suit.
As Jane Doe, right?
Originally, yes, as Jane Doe. She sues the FBI to get the documents related to that investigation.
Hold on, let's pause on that Jane Doe thing. She sued her own government anonymously.
She did. And that's a very strategic move. The source notes she wanted to protect the family's privacy while at the same time demanding public accountability. It's a total paradox.
She wants the information about the private investigation, but she has to sue anonymously to get it.
Yeah.
But why does she even need to sue? This is the part that I find so confusing. If I'm the alleged victim of a crime and the FBI investigates it, shouldn't I just be able to walk in and say, hey, can I see the file? It's my life.
You would think so, but no. And
Yeah.
this is a rabbit hole the source dives right into. The Privacy Act and FOIA exemptions are incredibly strict. Even if you are the victim, that file contains information about other people.
In this case, Brad Pitt.
Right. He has privacy rights. The children have privacy rights. The witnesses, maybe the flight attendants, they have privacy rights too.
So the FBI can't just hand Jolie the file because it technically belongs to everyone involved.
Exactly. They'd have to redact anything that pertains to Pitt's personal privacy unless he consents or unless there's a compelling public interest that outweighs his privacy. So what Jolie gets is a stack of papers that's basically just black ink.
And that's the transparency fight. She's basically saying, I can't heal or get legal protection or even understand what happened if I can't see the logic behind your decision not to prosecute.
Logic is the key word there. She wants the why. The source emphasizes this really strongly. It's not just about the raw notes. She wants to see the agent's reasoning. Why did they decide the evidence was insufficient? Did they believe her but just lack proof? Or did they just not believe her at all?
That distinction is massive. It's the difference between we know it happened but our hands are tied and we think you're making this up.
And that brings us to the psychological aspect the source covers. Is this about accountability or is it about revenge? When this story broke, the internet, you know how it is, immediately split into two camps.
Oh, of course. She's vindictive, she's dragging this up to hurt his career, versus she's a mother trying to protect her kids.
It's the standard narrative whenever a woman speaks up years later. Why now? But the source really does push back on that revenge narrative pretty hard.
What does it say?
It says that sources close to her argue this is about clarity. Think about the concept of gaslighting. If you go through a traumatic event, and then the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world looks at it and essentially says, nothing to see here, well, that really messes with your sense of reality.
It's like institutional gaslighting.
In a way, yeah. The source suggests her motivation is to ensure her children's experience isn't minimized. If the official record says nothing illegal happened, it invalidates the trauma of the people who are actually in the room.
But we have to look at the flip side too, right? Because the source is pretty balanced here. Pitt's team is not just sitting on the sidelines.
No, not at all.
They're pointing at that exact same FBI file and saying, look, the system worked.
And that is a perfectly valid legal argument. We have a presumption of innocence for a reason. They argue that he cooperated fully, he sat for the interviews, he didn't lawyer up and hide. The FBI and the LA County Department of Children and Family Services, they investigated and they cleared him.
Right.
So to them, bringing this up again or leaking details from the report is just an attempt to relitigate a closed case in the court of public opinion because she didn't get the outcome she wanted in the court of law.
It's a battle over who owns the history of what happened. Pitt is relying on the official government stamp.
And Jolie is trying to peel that stamp off to show what's underneath.
So that brings us to the legal threshold part of this deep dive. This is where I want to spend a minute, because the term insufficient evidence does a lot of heavy lifting in headlines, but it's actually a very technical concept.
There really is.
To a regular person, insufficient evidence sounds like we couldn't find the smoking gun. But in a federal context, it means something more specific, right?
Mm-hmm. It does. It's all about the gap between probable cause and beyond a reasonable doubt. To arrest someone, police need probable cause, but a federal prosecutor, a U.S. attorney, isn't going to authorize charges unless they believe they can win a conviction.
So they need to be able to convince a jury.
And on a private plane, that's tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a prosecutor's nightmare. Think about the environment. It's noisy, it's chaotic. You have conflicting witness statements. Maybe the kids saw different things. Maybe the staff is worried about their jobs. And there's no video footage. It just becomes a classic he said, she said.
And federal prosecutors have discretion, don't they? They aren't robots. They can choose not to pursue a case even if there is some evidence.
Absolutely. It's called prosecutorial discretion. They have to ask, is this the best use of federal resources? Is there a substantial federal interest here? Or is this whole thing better handled in family court? The source implies that the FBI might have just looked at this and said, this is messy, it's a dissolving marriage, and we don't have a slam dunk felony here. We're passing.
But they don't tell you that. They just send the letter.
Right. And that silence is what creates the vacuum that Jolie is now trying to fill. The source details how frustrating that opacity is. You feel like a cog in a machine that just spit you out.
Let's talk about the transparency aspect in relation to power. Because the source brings this up. Whenever powerful figures are involved, the public just assumes there's a thumb on the scale.
The whole two-tier justice system argument.
Exactly. If this were a regular couple in coach class on a commercial flight and a guy gets aggressive, the air marshal tackles him and he's in cuffs when they land. But here, it's a private jet, it's Brad Pitt, it's Angelina Jolie. Does that fame actually change the investigation?
Well, the source argues it cuts both ways. On one hand, yes, powerful people have better lawyers. They can navigate the system. They can make sure their cooperation looks very polite and managed. But on the other hand, the FBI knows the world is watching. They cannot afford to botch this.
So they might be even more cautious about filing charges. Like, if we come at the king, we best not miss.
That is a very real dynamic. If you charge a massive celebrity with a federal crime, you are inviting a media circus. You better have airtight evidence. If it's a 50-50 case, a prosecutor might just walk away to avoid a high-profile loss.
And that plays right into the theme the source brought up. Image often overshadows truth. In Hollywood, your image is your currency. A no charges filed headline is basically a license to keep printing money.
Which is why Jolie's persistence is so dangerous to that ecosystem. She is threatening the clean slate. The source describes her as standing firm in her version of events. Even though the public has mostly moved on, people are watching their movies, buying their products, she is keeping this one specific narrative alive.
It's interesting you mentioned the public moving on, because reading this, I got the sense that for her, this isn't even about the public. It's about the record. The source talks about her wanting to vindicate the experience for her children.
It echoes, doesn't it? It's not just a legal battle, it's a legacy battle. If the FBI file stands as it is, then historically, for the record, nothing happened. But if she gets the documents and can show that the FBI did find credible evidence but just chose not to prosecute, well, that changes the history books.
It changes the story from he's innocent to he got away with it.
Or at the very least, he got a pass. And that distinction matters immensely to a parent.
But is she actually going to get the document? I mean, the source seems a little ambiguous on how this FOIA battle will end.
It's an uphill battle. The DOJ fights these requests tooth and nail, not because they care about Brad Pitt, but because they care about the precedent.
Oh, well, that's a good point.
If they start handing over unredacted investigative files for closed cases, they open the floodgates. Every divorce lawyer in the country would start subpoenaing FBI files to get dirt for custody battles.
So the FBI doesn't want to become a weapon in family court.
Exactly. They want to stay out of it, so they hide behind the exemptions. This is an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. This reveals investigative techniques. They will redact until the page is meaningless.
So Jolie is probably looking at a lot of black bars.
Most likely. But sometimes even the black bars can tell a story. Just the sheer volume of the file can be validating. If there are hundreds of pages of interviews, it proves it wasn't some minor incident. It proves it was a major investigation.
It validates the seriousness of it, even if it doesn't result in a conviction.
Correct. And for someone who's just seeking clarity, maybe that's enough.
You know, stepping back from the celebrity angle for a second, this source makes you realize how fragile truth is in the legal system. We tend to think of the law as this binary thing, guilty or innocent, true or false. But this deep dive really shows it's mostly just gray.
It's entirely gray. The legal system isn't designed to find the truth, with a capital T. It's designed to resolve disputes and enforce statutes based on admissible evidence. And those are very different goals. You can have a situation where everyone in the room knows the truth, but the legal system produces a completely different result.
And that brings us to the human toll. The source mentions the emotional impact, and it's easy to forget, amidst all the FOIA requests and the legal teams, that this was a family breaking apart in a metal tube at 30,000 feet.
That's the tragedy underneath all the bureaucracy. The source emphasizes that Jolie is driven by this need to ensure her children's reality isn't dismissed. That's a very primal parental drive. It's not about legal strategy. It's about saying, I saw what I saw, and I will not let you pretend it didn't happen.
It really challenges you, the listener, too. I mean, thinking about our own lives, have you ever known something to be true, but the official story was different? Maybe at work, maybe in a relationship?
It's universal. The desire to have your reality acknowledged by an authority is so powerful. When the principal or the boss or the judge says, we don't see it that way, it creates this specific kind of wound, a wound of injustice.
And that wound doesn't heal just because the case is closed.
If anything, that closed stamp makes it fester. Because it feels so final. It feels like the world has moved on and left you screaming in a soundproof room.
That connects right to the final thought the source leaves us with.
Yeah.
It's a question that really stuck with me. When the spotlight fades, who decides which stories are truly heard?
It's a haunting question. In this case, is it the FDI, is it the tabloids, or is it the people who are actually there?
And I think the answer this source suggests is, it's a fight. It's never decided passively. You have to fight for your version of the story to be heard.
And sometimes that fight involves suing the Department of Justice.
Indeed. Well, this has been a heavy one, but a really necessary one. We went from a celebrity headline to the Freedom of Information Act and the very nature of truth itself.
That's the mission.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.